Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it means to see ourselves in others, to find that human core that links us all. It seems to be a dying art. In this era of stark polarization and tribalism, we seem more fixated on what makes us different, and then making that a rallying cry for why everyone else but us is wrong. Ever more isolated into ideological silos, we start to classify people as red hats or snowflakes, and we no longer see the full, complex human beings behind those labels. It's become harder and harder to connect. Studies have shown that over the last 10 years, there's been a marked drop in empathy between us, that ability to put ourselves in the shoes of another. And this is happening especially among our younger people, among our teenagers. Now, of course, technology has a lot to do with that. Increasing screen time has resulted in less personal interaction, and our young people seem to be losing the ability to read emotions or facial expressions or tone of voice. But it's not just that. Having a Facebook page filled with people with the same opinions makes us feel less akin with people outside our own circles. We've become a nation of us and them, and we don't recognize each other. Now, this is not just some disturbing psychological, theoretical trend. It has real on-the-ground implications. Because it's not a big leap to move from a lack of empathy to a lack of actual caring, to a lack of compassion, to a lack of community, to a culture where our own experiences and problems and suffering are the only ones that matter. The season of Lent is a time for us to move beyond our own familiar circles and echo chambers. It's a time for getting uncomfortable with ourselves. It's a season where we come face to face with our humanity and all of its messiness and contradiction. And that means facing our pain as well. As we've heard this morning, the word compassion means to suffer with. And I believe it's the deepest form of humanity there is. Because it strips away all of the masks and all of the false fronts we so carefully build up. And it acknowledges that to be human is to feel heartbreak. And I know that's something we usually try and run away from. It's frightening to be vulnerable, to admit that we are broken or that we hurt. We take a risk that an uncaring world will take advantage of that. We take a risk that our own pain will swallow us up. So we put on our armor and we pretend that we are okay. However, the practice of compassion, of suffering with each other, as essential as it is just so challenging. On the one hand, it's as simple as reaching out to someone in need, someone whose pain we understand. On the other hand, it involves a depth of feeling that can be hard to put into words. As I was reflecting on the sermon this week, out of the blue, my husband sent me a text with a clip of a human interest story that he saw last weekend. It's about a remarkable little boy in Florida. But rather than retell his story in this sermon in words, I'd like to show it to you. This child is the embodiment of compassion. He knows the pain of being hurt, abandoned, and rejected. And as young as he is, he seems to understand that the only way through his pain is to let his heartbreak become a source of healing for others. The Quaker writer, poet, and teacher Parker Palmer has a profound way to talk about the power of this kind of heartbreak. He says there are two essential ways that the human heart responds to emotional or spiritual pain. The first is to shatter apart in anger. to let the hurt that we feel explode our hearts apart into sharp shards that spray out from us, harming everyone in our path. Having been an abused child, Robbie could have so easily become an angry and hurtful person. In fact, this would have been quite understandable. So many adult abusers were victims as children, and their shattered hearts continue to perpetuate that cycle of violence and pain. Now, the second response, however, is to allow our pain to serve as a wedge, to break open our hearts wider, to make more room for the suffering of others, to become more deeply feeling, more compassionate, more connected, more human. The way our hearts break open can mean more or less pain in the world. And I don't know whether these two different responses are necessarily conscious choices. It's really hard to say. It can be a mystery as to why some broken hearts bend towards compassion and other towards anger or fear. Is it hardwiring? Is it random? Is it grace? Again, I don't know. But it's clear that no matter what life has given us, there are those among us who seem to be capable of breaking a cycle of pain and choosing open-heartedness. For much of Robbie's young life, his mom tells us he could not cry. He was described as an emotional stone. And I'm sure it was a protective measure. I mean, once the tears started, would they ever stop? But something inspired Robbie to find a positive, loving channel for his pain. And that photo of him holding that dying dog and sobbing for the first time, we can feel him changing. We're watching his heart break open wider in love. And he let himself feel. And in doing that, he began to heal. And he began to heal others. Because being compassionate doesn't just change our lives, it can change the world. I think of what Robbie said about not wanting any animal to feel the pain that he felt, and about how he wants to adopt unwanted older children when he grows up. In letting his heart break open wider, he's creating concentric circles of healing and grace that can move out so much farther from us than we can ever know. In Lent, we walk the footsteps of Jesus, the one who took in the suffering that the world gave him and let it break his heart open as wide as the cosmos. The one who saw in the blind and the lame and the lost and the forgotten and the unwanted a glimpse of a God who suffers with us. He gave that suffering meaning and dignity and grace. He told us it didn't make us less human, but more human. And that we could find our way to God through caring for each other. He shows us that our circle of care could ripple out beyond the folks that we can touch ourselves by creating waves of compassion that would get wider and wider, that could ultimately drench the world in love. So I ask each of us, where do we hurt? What's causing our hearts to break this day? And how might we choose to let our heart break open us in ways that might ripple out from us? Have we known hunger in our lives, or poverty, or homelessness? Have we felt hopeless or neglected? Is there a way that our pain can give us the courage and compassion to let someone else who's suffering know that they are not alone? Or a way that we can channel our energy towards supporting work that can heal people and help meet these needs? In this church alone, we have opportunities to care for our homeless neighbors through the work of the Interfaith Hospitality Network. We can teach English or provide companionship to a refugee family from Honduras through the Montclair Sanctuary Alliance. We can foster a child. We can adopt a shelter pet of our own, or become a mentor to a teenager who's struggling. And I know these small acts may feel so modest and maybe just like a drop in the bucket when we think about the magnitude of the suffering in the world. But the ripple effect can be endless. might start so small and simple, with loving a lame, snarly-toothed little Shih Tzu named Molly, for example. But compassion is powerful. And anything that makes us more human makes our world more humane. And it's in that deepest, messiest, brokenest part of our humanity that we catch a glimpse of God among us. And when we choose to touch that place in someone else, we can then start a chain reaction of love and care that stretches beyond our reach. With God's grace, we can start a chain of compassion that can heal the world. May it be so. Amen.